Yo, thank you guys so much for tuning into this video. We greatly appreciate you guys being here. As most of you know, Red had a recent experience where he got to participate in an exclusive content creator event for New World. And so in this video today, we wanted to cover specifically the combat and the changes that have been made to the combat in New World. So as you guys are probably aware, New World removed the global cooldowns in combat and increased the weapon swapping speed. So we're going to cover that and a little bit more in this video. So first, I want to ask Red, how does the weapon swapping speed specifically, how does that feel in New World now?
It feels good, dude. The weapon swapping specifically, I think, needed to be sped up just a little bit. There's a lot of time to kill, so to say, between the weapon swapping and the old system. I think a lot of things needed to be changed there, and they did make those changes. Me and you on the podcast, we talk all the time about how the combat felt with the global cooldown system in place and how slow it was, and really the changes that they made have made a significant increase to the overall feel of combat. I know a lot of people are worried that it might be too spammy now, but me and you have both spent tons of time in ESO, a game that does kind of get slammed for spammy combat, and this feels nothing like that at all.
Okay, so how does the weapon swapping speed feel like whenever? So before, and if any one of you played the preview event, you know, before, like having a second weapon, it was kind of hard to switch to that weapon during combat. So whenever you would have, whenever you switch from your primary to your secondary weapon, there was a bit of a delay there. It was really delayed. It was hard to get that weapon swapped in a timely manner. You would have to kind of move away from your enemy, swap weapons, and then move back. So is that kind of how it is still, or is it a lot faster so that like when you're in the mix while you're actually fighting, you can switch your weapon really quick and then trigger another ability?
Yeah, hey, that's exactly right, Bordy. Basically, in one of the main situations that you're going to recognize it, or that the feel is going to improve, I think tenfold, is when you're switching from a range to a melee weapon. So a lot of the times when you were focusing or playing with like a rifle and maybe a sword and shield or a hatchet of some sort, you would always have to be careful what cooldowns you use, because you're kind of have to, you know, be weary that you're not going to use one of your main cooldowns on your sword and shield or your hatchet or whatever. So that's not the case anymore. So you can open with your arrows and then follow up or get into melee range and still have all of your cooldowns available on your melee weapon, which is, to me, huge. Because before, like we had mentioned, combat just felt very lethargic in a way, because you were constantly having to manage these global cooldowns. You had to be real careful to not use, like, assign those skills to the same button that the ones, your main abilities for each weapon. So overall, dude, getting rid of the global cooldown system was the right choice, and it feels really, really good in game.
Awesome. So another huge, really hot button issue within the community, and I've seen a ton of people ask about this, or a ton of people worried about this, is they do feel like it's going to take away from the feel of light and heavy attacks, like being really relevant in the game, and the dodging. Everyone, that played, maybe not everyone, but the vast majority of people that played really loved the way the combat was, because it's very skill based and it had an overall positive experience with that combat. So now people are worried that it's going to turn into just this ability spam type of combat, kind of like an ESO. Do you think that's going to be the case, or are we still going to be able to use like light and heavy attacks and player skill to dodge out of the way? Is that still going to play a huge part in combat too, or is it going to be just spamming abilities now?
No, I think, here's the thing with that concern, is that these cooldowns are still relatively long. A lot of these weapon skill cooldowns are 15 to 20 seconds. There isn't any situations where you're running into like an ability that's like 2 seconds, or in ESO, there is literally no cooldown. Like you can spam an ability as often as you want sometimes in that game, and New World is not like that at all. Almost all the weapon skills have cooldowns, I believe, and some of them have as long as 15 to 20 second cooldowns. So when you're talking about like spamming abilities, especially the same one, that's impossible in New World still, even with the changes.
Yeah, so I think people are worried that you'll use an ability on your front bar. Like, so you have 3 bars. So if, say you have an axe, a sword, and a staff equipped. So if you use an ability with your axe, then you quickly switch over to your sword, just chaining abilities together like that while you're switching weapons, is that going to be a problem? So just being able to quickly use abilities now that there's no shared cooldowns, and then maybe timing that so your cooldowns go away, and then being able to use them on your bar. Does that make sense? Is that you think that's going to be an issue?
Yeah, I know what you're saying, and that is, again, I think the weapon swapping isn't that fast, right? So I'm not going to be able to, like, chain abilities from different weapons together. You still do have to weapon swap. Again, these weapons don't have abilities that have, like, very, very short cooldowns. And I think the nature of combat in New World as a whole is meant to be slow paced, and to have those the short and heavy attacks to be a major part of it, dodging as well. And I don't think anything like that has changed at this point. I think you're still going to have to be very very good at maneuvering your character, blocking and using your light and heavy attacks to be efficient in combat. I don't think the removal of global cooldowns reduce the level of skill it requires at all.
Nice. So what I'm hearing sounds very encouraging for the game. It sounds like the core of the combat has stayed the same. It is only improved. That's what I'm getting from this conversation here. Okay, so how do you think these changes are going to affect specifically PvP in New World? You and I both are huge PvPers. Sure. How do you think that's going to affect the PvP scene?
Okay, so arguably, I don't know if it's made it better or worse. I think generally. The changes that they made to the stun locking and everything like that are the bigger changes in combat for PvP, in my opinion. Because me and you both know that, especially in the preview event when we were PvPing, a lot of the problems with PvP is being able to, like, stun lock someone to death. They had no counterplay to anything you could do. And the changes that they made to being able to dodge roll even when you're depleted of stamina, once you get hit by a player, all of those changes are the changes that I think are significantly improving the combat in PvP. Overall, I do think the PvP combat has improved, but I'm not so sure it was because of the global cooldown removal, because I think, like you had touched on before, light and heavy attacks are a big part of that, and they still are, I think, in PvP.
Awesome, man. That sounds great. So one last question before we wrap this video up, and that's related to the PvE side. I asked you about PvP. So how do you think PvE is going to feel? And I know that you had some PvE experiences during this creator event that you got to play in. So how was just the overall feeling when you PvE'd now compared to before?
So I think overall, the changes in abilities or the cooldowns improves the feel of PvE. It doesn't feel good, especially when you're competing with computer people, and you're fighting mobs and everything like that. It doesn't feel good to be limited to, like, skills and abilities from different weapons to be on cooldowns with the same button. So I guess, long story short, it doesn't feel good to be, like, having to pay attention to what skill you're using on what weapon, because you'll want to use another skill later. That just doesn't, in my opinion, it kind of takes away the flow of combat, so to say. So basically, you're just constantly having to think about things that aren't really relevant to, the feel or the fun of an MMO, and specifically New World. Because really, what do we all want to do? We all want to use cool abilities to kill mobs. We all, managing 3 skills on 3 weapons is really not that big of a deal. And nor, with weapon swapping and everything like that, nor is it going to become spammy, I don't think, especially since the cooldowns are the way they are. And if it does, all they really have to do is increase the cooldown time on all the skills, right? To add an extra 2 or 3 seconds to each cooldown on each weapon ability, and there you go. You've kind of taken away the spamminess, so...
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think that's probably going to wrap it up for this video, man. It sounds incredibly encouraging. I'm so glad you got a chance to participate in that event and that you could share that information with us, because I know a ton of people are wanting to know how the combat feels now. So I hope this answered a lot of questions out there and helped some people get kind of a general overall view and overall feel of how the combat feels, and hopefully put some people at ease that feel like that the combat's going to be incredibly spammy. I know that's a huge issue. So hopefully with this information that puts you guys at ease. But thank you guys so much for watching. Red, do you have anything else?
No, that's it, guys. Don't forget to follow the Studio Loot Twitter account. That's where we tweet out everything that we do here on Studio Loot, whether it be videos on YouTube, the podcast VODs, new articles on New World fans. It all gets tweeted out through there, so don't forget to go follow that.
Absolutely. Account. Yep. Well, thank you guys so much for watching. We will see you guys in the next one.